The late May heat hung over Willow Creek like a damp blanket, thick and unrelenting, stifling the usual chatter of birds and ing only the hum of distant lawnmowers and the faint droop of marigolds lining the pristine walkways. The air shimmered above the asphalt, warping the neat rows of mailboxes and manicured lawns into a hazy mirage. On the shaded porch of his modest home, Sergeant Major Isaiah Coleman, retired, sat in his wheelchair, drawing slow breaths of the heavy air. At 92, his body was frail, etched with the weight of decades, but his eyes deep, dark, framed by snowy brows burned with a clarity unbroken by time. 30 years in the Army had forged a quiet strength in him, a disciplined courage that lingered in his stillness. Beside him, on a wicker table, sat a glass-fronted case, simple but heavy with meaning. Inside, against navy velvet, gleamed the relics of his Sayre VYC. A silver star from a frozen Korean hillside, bronze stars for Vietnam's suffocating jungles, a purple heart that whispered of blood and steel, and campaign ribbons tracing wars across continents. These weren't just medals. They were pieces of his soul, markers of comrades lost, a silent testament to a life given for his country. Isaiah's afternoons often found him here, the case a quiet companion, its soft reflections catching the light of the ancient oak that stood guard over his lawn. The stillness shattered with the sharp click-clack of heels on pavement, a sound that announced authority before its owner appeared. Margaret Hensley rounded the hedge, her posture rigid, a clipboard clutched like a shield against her chest. Her silver hair, sprayed into an unyielding helmet, defied the humidity, and her pale eyes, magnified by prim glasses, swept Isaiah's porch with the precision of a hawk hunting for flaws. As chairperson of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association's Architectural Review Committee, Margaret, known in hushed tones as the HOA tyrant, saw herself as the keeper of the neighborhood's perfection, a role she wielded with ruthless zeal. To her, Isaiah, a black veteran who'd moved in a decade ago, was an outsider, his presence a subtle challenge to her curated order. She stopped at the porch steps, her gaze locking onto the metal case. A frown creased her brow, deepening as the metal's faint glint caught the sun. "Mr. Coleman," she began, her voice slicing through the humid air, "we need to discuss this display." Isaiah turned slowly, his movements careful, his eyes meeting hers with calm defiance. "Ms. Hensley," he rumbled, his voice low and steady. "It's a fine afternoon, isn't it?" "Fine afternoons don't excuse rule-breaking," she snapped, tapping her clipboard with a coral-polished nail. Per Article 7, Section B, Paragraph 4 of the Willow Creek Covenants, exterior items causing glare are prohibited. "Those metals," she said, the word dripping with disdain, "are a hazard, distracting drivers and lowering our aesthetic standards." Isaiah's gaze drifted to the case, then back to her. "With respect, Ms. Hensley, these aren't decorations. They're my Sayre VYC medals, earned in blood for this country. Their purpose is irrelevant." Margaret shot back, her composure fraying. "They cause glare. That's a violation. Take them inside. Now." Isaiah's hands tightened on his chair, his face unreadable. He looked past her to the oak, its leaves whispering in the breeze, then met her eyes again. "No," he said softly, the word carrying a lifetime's resolve. "These stay. They're on my property, and they honor my Sayre VY, seeing the men who didn't come home." Margaret's face flushed crimson, her lips thinning to a venomous line. "People like you," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage, "think you're above the rules. You move in, disrupt our standards, and expect special treatment." The words hung in the air, raw and ugly, as the screen door creaked open. Naomi Carter, Isaiah's granddaughter, stepped out, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. A grad student staying with her grandfather, she'd heard the raised voices through the open window. "Grandpa, you okay?" she asked, glancing from Isaiah's tense frame to Margaret's fury. "Everything is saw and not saw okay," Margaret spat, turning her glare on Naomi. Your grandfather is willfully violating HOA rules with those shiny trinkets. Naomi's protective instincts flared. She saw the tremor in Isaiah's hand, a rare sign of distress. Something ugly simmered here, beyond a petty rule dispute. Instinctively, she slipped her phone from her pocket, tapped the livestream icon, and angled it to capture both Margaret and Isaiah. The red light blinked on. "What specific rule, Miss Hensley?" Naomi asked, her voice steady but firm. "He's just sitting on his porch." "They're prohibited," Margaret shrieked, her control slipping. She stepped closer, right to the porch railing, her eyes blazing at Isaiah. "I'm the authority here. You saw comply." Naomi's voice hardened. "Miss Hensley, lower your voice. You're upsetting him." Margaret's laugh was harsh, cruel. "Upsetting saw. He's upsetting the whole neighborhood." Her hand dove into her handbag, emerging with a black canister. Naomi's breath caught. "No, don't." But Margaret, consumed by rage and prejudice, was beyond reason. "You defiant old man," she screamed, aiming the pepper spray at Isaiah's face and pressing the nozzle. A bright orange stream hit him squarely, eyes, nose, mouth. Isaiah gasped, a strangled cry escaping as he clawed at his burning face, coughing violently. The acrid stench of capsaicin filled the air, stinging even from feet away. "Grandpa!" Naomi screamed, dropping her phone on the table, the stream still broadcasting. She rushed to him, grabbing a napkin to wipe his face, her voice breaking. "Water! Someone get water!" Margaret stood frozen, the canister still in her grip, a flicker of triumph giving way to dawning horror. Neighbors spilled out, their curiosity turning to shock. A man across the street dialed 911, his voice urgent. "An elderly man's been assaulted, pepper sprayed by a neighbor. Hurry!" Naomi, trembling, snatched her phone and called her father. "Dad, it's Margaret Hensley." She sprayed Grandpa in the face over his medals. "I got on video. Please come." 10 minutes later, Daniel Carter's sedan screeched to a halt behind a flashing police cruiser. A retired JAG colonel, Daniel carried the quiet authority of decades navigating military law. Seeing Isaiah's face swollen, eyes shut, paramedics flushing his eyes ignited a cold fury. Naomi ran to him, sobbing. She called him "people like you, Dad." She sprayed him like an animal. Daniel hugged her briefly, then scanned the scene. Isaiah, struggling but stabilizing. Naomi, distraught. The phone, still recording, and Margaret, spinning a tale to the officers. "He was belligerent," she insisted. "I felt threatened." Daniel strode forward, his presence shifting the air. "I'm Daniel Carter, Colonel, JAG Corps, retired," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "That man," he pointed to Isaiah, "is my father-in-law, Sergeant Major Isaiah Coleman, a 92-year-old veteran. That woman," he fixed Margaret with a searing look, "just assaulted him unprovoked." Turning to the officers, he continued, "My daughter's video captured everything, including her hateful language. This is aggravated assault, potentially a hate crime, given the victim's race and her documented bias against certain residents." Officer Sanchez, a seasoned sergeant, nodded gravely. "Ma'am," he told Margaret, "you're being detained for assault." Margaret's face paled. "Detained? I'm a respected leader here. This is an HOA matter." Daniel's voice cut through. "This is a criminal matter, Ms. Hensley. Assaulting a veteran of his age shows malice the justice system won't ignore." As Margaret was led away, protesting, Daniel turned to Isaiah, now breathing easier but shaken. Naomi recounted the incident, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel's mind raced. Margaret's words, "people like you," echoed complaints he'd heard about her targeting minority families. This wasn't just about medals. It felt deliberate, part of something bigger. Over the next days, while Isaiah recovered, his eyesight spared, though his spirit bruised, Daniel investigated. He and Naomi documented every interaction with Margaret, noting her microaggressions. He spoke to neighbors, uncovering a pattern. The Limps, fined repeatedly for their fence's shade, the Patels, harassed over a basketball hoop, The Garcias, scrutinized for a decades-old fence. White residents, meanwhile, faced only gentle reminders. Margaret wasn't just biased, she was weaponizing the HOA rules against those she deemed unfit. A VY sit to Clara Thompson, a former HOA secretary, was pivotal. Clara, indignant over Isaiah's assault, handed Daniel a box of records from 2010 to 2018. Margaret's power went to her head, she said. Daniel pored over the documents, comparing old bylaws to the current ones. He found fraud. Key amendments, like those on paint colors and fines, appeared without recorded votes. Wording had been altered, loopholes widened for some, tightened for others. Financial records revealed suspicious payments to contractors and a shell company tied to the HOA treasurer, Ronald Pierce. Margaret and Ronald had doctored the bylaws, embedding her prejudice and embezzling funds. Daniel contacted a CIVYL rights law firm, presenting the VY Deo, Clara's records, neighbor testimonies, and financial EVY Denke. A class action lawsuit was filed against Margaret, Ronald, and the HOA, alleging discrimination, fraud, and assault. The district attorney added felony fraud and conspiracy to Margaret's charges. The VY Deo, now VY Rel, fueled public outrage. Hashtags like the Justice for Isaiah trended, and donations poured in. The HOA board, complicit through inaction, collapsed under pressure, replaced by a diverse interim committee. Margaret's trial was swift. The VY Deo, Isaiah's dignified testimony, and EVY Denke of her fraud and bias crushed her defense. She was con VY Ted of assault, elder abuse, hate crimes, fraud, and conspiracy, sentenced to 10 years. Ronald pleaded guilty to lesser charges. The CIVYL suit awarded damages to Isaiah and harassed families, with punitive fines bankrupting Margaret. Her home was sold, her assets liquidated. Willow Creek began to heal. The fraudulent bylaws were scrapped, replaced with fair rules. Neighbors relaxed, gardens bloomed freely, and kids played without fear. Isaiah sat on his porch, his medals gleaming softly, now a symbol of honor. Neighbors waved, some stopping to thank him. Naomi read to him, and Daniel VY cited often, watching the man who'd faced wars now rest in peace. Isaiah's ordeal had exposed a rot, and his quiet courage, Naomi's quick thinking, and Daniel's pursuit of truth had freed a community. Margaret's name became a warning, whispered in caution. The medals, once a spark of conflict, stood as a testament to resilience, shining in the gentle summer light.